Mr. Carl Haffner, thank you for joining me for our expert interview and a little expose amongst the GCS community. So for people that don't know Carl, I'll let Carl introduce himself properly, but I think I've got a pretty good overview for you of who Mr. Haffner is and all of the wonderful work he's done. So tried and tested entrepreneur, run a very successful lighting company, and then run a very successful cannabis company and built both from essentially the ground up. Worked with clients around the world, including Coca-Cola, Heathrow Airport, and Pepsi as well. And so you work with people from New Zealand to Japan to Turkey and Italy and probably everywhere else in between, Carl. So as one of the few people that has actually been there and done that in cannabis cultivation, we have the man himself, Mr. Carl Haffner, for a little interview to walk us through the pitfalls, challenges, the opportunities, and really how to actually succeed in the cannabis industry. And I think you did it before everyone else even thought about it as well, Carl. So you've been pretty ahead of the game and pretty switched on in that sense. So I don't know if you want to put a bit more meat on the bones to that introduction for us, Carl, and let people know who you are in your own words. But
yeah, sure.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello to everybody out there listening. So, as Chris quite rightly said, I've actually been an entrepreneur now since 2003, where I founded an LED lighting company, which was the very early days of LED lighting technology. I built that and ran that for 15 years. Worked with helping develop production techniques within factories within China and smooth lining their process, although they were very good. And they were manufacturing our products under license. So we had 6 factories there working for us pretty much day and night. And we were supplying lights all over the UK to mainly to the supermarkets, schools, libraries, offices, factories, you name it, whatever they were. And as Chris mentioned, Heathrow Airport. And then we ventured further afield into the US, where we had a great contract with both Pepsi and Coke for their vending machines, which was a fantastic step forward for the company. But that's how I also got introduced into the world of cannabis. Slight leap in company to company. Pepsi and Coke weren't really interested in it. It was more to do with the lighting side. So I was asked to design a grow light, which I did. I designed a grow light for 2 companies, one in Colorado and one in Oklahoma, which they did some testing work on it. That was back in 2016. Took around 2 years worth of work, and then soon realized that the 2 companies there, called Philips and Osram, who were going to pretty much take over the market. And as we've seen, they have done and evolved into other companies and other ventures. And so it wasn't really a place for me, but it gave me the buzz to look at how can we get into cannabis. So at that particular point, this is now June of 2018, I went to a cannabis raise in London, saw how excited people were and how much money was flowing around and how quick it would be, and obviously bought into the green rush like everybody else, and decided that with some friends of mine, we would build a cannabis business. And we founded Avida Global, a UK-based company. And with the cultivation, after convincing my wife and my father-in-law in Colombia on their land that we're going to grow cannabis. So I then went to Colombia, spent 4 years of my life in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, 12 kilometers from Venezuela, in an ex-guerrilla controlled conflict zone, only a year and a half before, building a very complex business of cultivating, growing, harvesting, post-harvesting, and extracting and producing a pharmaceutical grade API product, as I said, in the middle of a field. So we built a very sophisticated business, probably the most sophisticated in that region. And if anybody knows Colombia, it's in the northeast region called Cesar, which is around 6 hours drive south from Santa Marta, which is obviously on the coast. And it had its challenges. But what it did do over that period of time was allow me to gain an education, as I like to call it, my cannabis university, very much hands-on. And like with everything, my entrepreneurial side allows me to dig deep, get involved, get my hands dirty, roll my sleeves up, as it were, and pick up a shovel or learn all the techniques required, digging holes, driving bulldozers, and also cultivating cannabis. So we built these fantastic greenhouses. designed specifically for the location of where they were to take advantage of the climate, the wind flow, etc. Very high temperatures, but we put together a fantastic team who allowed us to take advantage of that climate to find the right strains and build in the right techniques for the cultivation. And then we built a full-on EU GMP compliant, I will say compliant because it didn't quite get through to certification, extraction and processing facility. It was going through certification just as I was leaving, to be fair. But we managed to gain GACP certification prior to that. And I was there for 4 years. The reason for leaving was for personal reasons. My family was in the UK and I was in Colombia. And I chose to go down a different path and took a small exit from the company and decided to set up a completely different part of the cannabis business in the sense of helping people. Now, having spent 4 years doing it, learning all about it, learning the ups and downs, the pitfalls, what to do right and what not to do right, which, believe it or not, there are many, especially when you're learning a new skill or a new process. I decided that the world of consultancy didn't really have many, let's say, well-educated people in the sense of actually, as Chris mentioned, have been there, done it, seen it, etc., etc. There's no offense to anyone that has, but a lot of people have learned through documentation or, conversation. And so I decided at that point that I would offer out my skills with a number of associate people I have placed strategically around the world to cannabis companies to go through the whole process that I did. And that is everything from a idea, a clean sheet of paper, design and build the facility, not physically build it, but go through the process of project managing it, etc., with the ultimate goal of getting them through GACP certification, ISO certification, and EU GMP certification. So what we do as a business is pretty much end to end, but we will get you audit ready for your auditors to come and do the certification process. So it's quite involved. It does involve a lot of different aspects and different skill sets, which I offer quite a lot of them, but I have, as I mentioned, other people in different locations. To date, we've helped 31 companies in 5 continents. Not all of them have been brand new startup businesses. A lot of them have been businesses that have gone down the path, realized that it's a lot harder to go through than they originally thought. So we've helped them restructure, reorganize, find a better way forward. A lot of the time, even though they've got to spend money, we're actually saving the money as well at the same time. And I encourage anyone out there, and obviously it's not just for me, but primarily for me, is to employ a consultant on day 1, because day 2 has already cost you money, day 3 has cost you more money, and day 4 you're being left behind. So I like to get in there at the beginning. Whilst it's a cost, it's also a cost that's a benefit because it's actually saving you time and money down the line. That's pretty much it, right? That's where I am.
And I think that succinctly summarizes the purpose of the podcast, which is that by the end of this, we want to make sure that anyone that's there with that money isn't wasting it. It's Correct. Not going into dead ends. It's not just withering away, being depleted slowly by strange decisions. And thank you, Carl, for being willing to guide people through this at scale and speak to many at once. Because I think a lot of people need to hear what you've got to say and would benefit from your kind expertise and wisdom when it comes to how do you navigate something that most people haven't done, can't do, think they can do, and would like to be doing. So I think really personally for me, it's more my interests questions to start with. Entrepreneurship wise, and I think we'll get to cannabis and maybe expand on the sort of chronological order of your life, Carl.
Okay. It's been a long life.
And it'll keep going, I have no doubt. Lighting.
Yes.
Starting a business in lighting. 20 years ago now, internet maybe wasn't as useful as it was. What, for people maybe starting businesses, could they learn from your time setting up and scaling a lighting business internationally? Maybe not a full mental framework from me, Carl, but in terms of what it takes, what it means, time scales, things like that. You've spent 15 years developing and building it.
Yeah.
What could people learn from that experience that you've had there? And what did you learn from that sort of 15-year end-to-end process of going for the full timeline life cycle almost of a business?
Okay. So first of all, I mean, the thing is, don't be afraid is the key bit, because anyone stepping out a regular salary and everything else is going to fall into, and forgive me, I think my Siri is about to talk. So
It's got you at the same time.
there we go. Get rid of it. So yeah, so stepping out from a regular paid salary into doing your own thing is a daunting task, but be prepared to do everything at the beginning. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that come into it, they've got an idea, they've got a wonderful plan, and money is always the tightest thing. So they think, well, how am I going to do it? And then they decide, well, I'm going to employ someone to do this, and employ someone to do that, employ someone to do that, and that tight money just gets tighter, and before you know it, you run out of money. So just be prepared to do everything. Try and beg and borrow time from family and friends. Family is always a good one, because they always try to share the love and hope for you to succeed. And perseverance is more than anything, because you'll have a lot of days where you work so many hours, nobody understands why, and you start to question yourself. And it's good to question yourself, but question yourself with the point of answering it for the future, not answering it for today. And as you quite rightly asked, is the biggest problem to succeed is time. If you succeed in a week, then amazing, fantastic, you found something that no one else has got, and it's like selling a button to everybody in India. You're going to be a billionaire in no time at all. But the reality is, it doesn't work that way. And I've often been told, well, it takes 3 to 5 years. And to be fair, it actually does. It takes a lot of time. And you've got to start trusting in people, which is always a difficult part as well at the beginning. Even though you want to employ people, you've still got to learn to trust, because your first employee is usually your biggest expense, and you tend to pay them more than you earn, because by the nature of you need their help. And so you've just got to understand that whilst you own the company and you appear to be the king of the hill, you're not always the most important person for the business to succeed. And I think that's where you've got to look at it and remove ego. Ego is the biggest killer of a lot of startup businesses. And learn.
That's very interesting.
And learn everything. That's
As you sort of, I guess, ended up dealing with larger and larger clients as well. And the reason I'm asking is I think it'll translate nicely over to the cannabis conversation that we will have. Going from dealing with maybe smaller clients at the start to then Heathrow and Pepsi, which is, I guess, where a lot of cannabis businesses would like to get to, what we're dealing with large conglomerates.
Yeah.
Exactly. What key differences did you sort of see between those clients, but then also, like, what changes did you have to maybe make in order to be able to attract those clients and win that business too?
Good question. Good question. The thing is, all clients are pretty much equal, but it's like anybody that gets into the world of sales, because running your own business, you're a permanent salesman, regardless of whether people say sales or you're permanently selling everything. And you need the smaller clients to be your everyday, your bread and butter money. The large clients you work on in the background, and you persist, and you can persist, and to a point where you're almost annoying people. But you tend to find that large clients have got so many hoops that you've got to go through. So for instance, I'll take Heathrow as a great example. We just so anyone knows, we did Terminal 3, everything from the plane to the car park. So when you get off the plane and get to your car, all the lights that you walk under are mine, and they're still mine, and they should have been replaced 3 years ago, but they're still working perfectly. Testament to the production and the team that was behind it. Anyway, the thing with Heathrow is, well, we can't trade with you because you're not an ISO certified company. Okay, so you go down the route of an ISO certification. Okay, we can't trade with you because you don't actually have audited accounts by a certain accountancy firm. So you go down that route. And all of these things, they're just a couple of examples. All of these things are in the background. And to deal with them direct is also very difficult. So we actually had to deal with them through a third party. And at the time, that third party was their their company looking after all of their facilities. So it's a facilities management company. I think at the time it was Mice. And whilst you're dealing with Heathrow because you need them to approve it, you're also then having to deal with the other company who's going to actually do the purchase of it. Whilst one tells the other what to do, it doesn't always work smoothly in that respect. And then the biggest issue with large clients and anybody who gets into the world of being an entrepreneur, especially when you're producing a product and selling a product, cash flow is always your issue. And large clients don't pay in a timely manner. They pay on time, don't get that wrong, but their terms are not your terms. So you want your terms of 30 days, for instance. Well, you either want them on the day, to be fair, cash on delivery, but it never works that way. So let's give it 30 days. But large companies want 90 days end of month. So you're looking at 120 days in the worst case scenario. And you've got to find a way to be able to live because you're still manufacturing product. So any money you earn is being sent to your manufacturer to be able to just bring the product in. So whilst you always make a profitable business, you never actually see any cash. So that's the tricky part of large clients. So you need either a great banking system, which then ends up turning into things like factoring and invoice discounting, which is good, but also can be very restrictive, especially as those clients grow. And that's what you then need to have, which becomes a bit of a conundrum. You need more of those large clients to be able to sustain the growth within the factoring side, because factoring will only limit so much per client. So you've got to de-risk their side, but increase the risk on your side.
Yeah, I see.
If you get a magical client that, pays you a lot of money up front and it's wonderful, hang on to that cash as much as you can. They're the ones that you really want to take care of. Everybody's equal, to be fair, as I mentioned at the beginning, but you got to take care of those that you can see that there's not necessarily a golden goose at the end, but there's at least a nice pot of gold that allow you to flow your company without having the restriction of factoring, etc. So that's the biggest part. And of course, relationships are all important. Just keep talking, keep that relationship going, and more importantly, if there's a problem, talk about it on day one or the minute it happens, and then find a solution of how you're going to resolve it, because that actually strengthens any relationship more than you can imagine. It seems like a negative, but if you can fix a problem that either you've created or the client's created, and you own up to it from day one and find a solution, that's where you'll start to win repeat business from them. Yes, it's great to deliver on time and every time, but a lot of people get complacent about that. So I'm not saying you want a problem, but they happen. That is the key element.
Yeah. Which maybe transitions well into cannabis, Carl, where there's many problems all the time. Synonymous with problems, the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
So moving from having developed those kinds of relationships, that kind of infrastructure, and that kind of sort of almost like management process, I suppose, how well do you think that set you up for cannabis operations?
Quite good, actually, mainly because if I go back to the beginning of the lighting industry, I knew nothing about lighting, and therein I knew very little about cannabis other than what I'd done in the sense of the lighting again. And then stepping into an industry that is basically a newly legalized drug industry, which only a year before in Colombia it was illegal. A year before that year it was still illegal in the UK, apart from the CBD market. And I was stepping into the psychoactive side of things, so very different position. The scale of the education and the problems and how to overcome them was definitely helped by running that lighting business for so long, because you just are always looking for solutions. And that's the one thing that I told everybody, especially in the company side. We're a solutions company, not a problems company. So if ever there was an issue, right away we sorted it, and then we worked together to find a solution to it. Whether that be, if I take Colombia, for instance, whether that be working on it on a geopolitical side, working with staffing issues, working with the fact that we're growing plants, but we can't harvest them because a piece of equipment hasn't arrived on time. And more importantly, managing the expectations time-wise for shareholders. Because you remember at the beginning of this industry, everybody was going to get rich in a week.
Yeah.
Now, bringing my knowledge and my feel of building a business, you're never going to get rich in a week, no matter what the business, unless of course you find that button that I mentioned about sell to people in India. And by the way, that's only because there's 1.4 billion of them there.
Yeah.
And so what you've got to do is understand something which I understood very well, because one thing I haven't mentioned on here is I actually studied horticulture in my university years. So I have a knowledge of how things grow and how long it takes to grow, as most people in the world of, let's say, farming do as well. So you're not throwing seeds in the ground and then it's going to grow overnight. You're throwing seeds in the ground or in a pot or whatever house system you're growing, and within 3 months you can harvest. But then you've got to go through another step and another step and another step and another step to produce a product. And of course, in the meantime, you've got to sell it, and you're selling a narcotic that is not always legal in any part of the world. So you're dealing with other problems, as we know, like banking, insurance, transport, customs, yada, 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 many different things that get in the way. And so just bringing that entrepreneurial spirit into it allowed us to solve problems, and then educating the staff I had to also go down that route to solve problems. But the other part about staff, and this is something I learned from before, it's what I learned into and brought into this one, is making sure the staff knew what their relevance was within the company. Because a lot of staff they employ and they think, oh, I've got a job, great. No, you got to instill to them, say, look, why are you relevant, and own that relevance and keep being relevant and find ways to stay relevant. Sounds a harsh lesson, but believe me, it allows people to then start to think, well, I want to achieve more. I want to be the next thing. So they're always striving to be educated and go further. And it allows them to ask questions. And questions are fantastic. And I welcome anybody that's got a business to keep that door open. I know we always say, I've got an open door policy and everything else, but actually do it and let people ask you the questions. No matter how low down the chain they may be or senior they may be, you're still the one person that can answer nearly all the questions. And that's what helped a lot. I mean, just on that alone is I was always also learning as well, because I'm learning about a new product, a new industry, a new process. But it was also the first time I was involved with a board. And whilst I had my own company, I only had myself and a small investor in the previous business. This side, I had a company, and we had 5 board members and then advisors and then 200 shareholders, and it's a whole different corporate space to be in. So you're learning a lot all the time, and that both of those are hostile environments, let's say. They don't need to be, but they are. Just
potentially very hostile environments now.
Yeah.
On that note then, slightly, Carl, like for people that haven't, there's people that watch this that haven't maybe set up a business or are thinking about setting up a cannabis business or something along those lines, working in one, investing in one. What for you were some of the key foundations that you needed to put in place at the start of that Avida Global journey? Like, it's going from that transition investors to having 200 shareholders. Like, how was that journey, and what were the sort of steps that you had to take almost, or what was your mental perspective going into that, should I say, like your mental framework? Was it a sort of phased approach, or was a lot of this sort of established almost in your network?
Totally phased approach, because the majority of the business was done in Colombia. Okay, in the UK side had a lot of UK issues to deal with, like POCA, as we all know, Proceeds of Crime Act, and banking, etc. Okay, but in Colombia, we had to go through a whole process of applying for licenses. The industry was about a year old, so the license process changed. This changed, that changed. We had to go through an agronomical process with the Ministry of Agriculture, and in the world of cannabis, and it's not unique to Colombia, you have to spend a lot of money before you actually get issued your licenses. And taking the risk is all on you up front. And that's where you've got to be very strong minded, but also very determined to make it happen. And anyone that's getting into it is they've got to have that mindset. And yes, it'd be fantastic to have the biggest bank account in the world, but that also sometimes can be counterproductive because then people go spending all over the place. So budgeting with what you've got, budgeting to know when you need to raise more money is also a key part, because obviously raising money takes time for management. It's costly, even though it doesn't seem to be. It's one of those invisible costs, but it's costly. And you don't want a whole load of shareholders from day one, because you protected the interests of the founders, the owners originally, who want to still maintain a reasonable shareholding in the business. And so you build up value, then you raise money, build up value, then you raise money, and then you should stop raising money when you're actually commercial and you're making money. That's the goal. But on that very point, commercial is when you start your business, you need to define what you're going to grow, or what you're going to make, and what you're going to manufacture. And it seems like a finger in the air and a crystal ball moment, because it's could be 2 years before you sell anything.
Yeah.
And cannabis requires an element of consistency and stability, and making sure that product is produced the same, as close as it can for a bioproduct every single time. And GCP requires a level of collection and understanding, and GMP requires a level of stability. So you've got quite a lot of things to go through before you can really sell a product. So how do you know what you're going to sell and who you're going to sell it to? So you have to work with either pharmaceutical companies, the clinics, end manufacturers, to know that your strain that you're growing is not just a random strain that you think, oh, it's wonderful, I'm going to grow it because it's got so many percent of this and so many percent of that. A lot of the minors also are very valuable, and it's understanding the nuances around what's in that to what is required over here, and work with those clinics and those end manufacturers from day one. You can't sell them anything necessarily, but keep that relationship going, and they'll remember your name and remember your name.
Yeah.
Just keep them updated. Keep them as a stakeholder that's not spending any money with you, or not, you're not buying anything from them. You're just keeping them informed all the time. And that is a really key part. And always, wherever you can, get GCP. ISO is a good one to get in the middle. And as everyone will know, or those that don't know yet, I do post on LinkedIn every day, but my post on Tuesday next week is all about the relevance of having EU GMP, whether you think you need it or not. Because if you don't, you get left behind. It's the way the world is going. And there's many people out there who will disagree with me because they come from the black market or the recreational world and think it's an artisan product. Yes, that's great. That's where that was. But where we are now, we're heading to a proper medicinal product. And that's what you've got to really keep in mind and always focus on that. And then the one last one that anybody setting up a cannabis business that I always tell them is, you've got to think about, when you're building it, you've got to think about liability. Because if you grow it and it's okay, it's fine, it might have a bit of this in, but we'll pass, and this company over here will help it get to market, and so on and so forth. You got to take all that out of your mind. Because if this patient over here is prescribed by this doctor here, and that patient gets sick, or God forbid they die, anything tragic happens to them, the insurance company are going to go, right, where'd you get it from? So they'll talk to the doctor say, where'd you get it from? They're going to talk to the manufacturer, and where'd you get it from? And it's going to go all the way down the chain until they find a problem. A problem could be here, but if it gets to you as the company that's manufacturing and growing and cultivating, what did you do wrong? Now, you could have liability insurance, and that's great, but it doesn't take away the bad news, because your company, your product has damaged somebody in such a way. That's the bad news that follows you, and there's the liability. You've got to try to mitigate that risk.
I think that's a great point, Carl. A lot of people forget that there's health outcomes at the end of the process that we're talking about. The industry has a downstream effect on potentially vulnerable people at different stages of disease and different levels of health.
Right.
And I liked what you said about minor cannabinoids as well, Carl. The number of people that I speak to that are just fixated on THC levels arbitrarily, because that's one measure of how maybe strong or good a strain might be, but doesn't necessarily correlate to, again, the health outcomes of what that patient will experience, or how it will help them manage their symptoms in some way, or whether it's even useful in the first place. I was very interested by, I've got a couple of little comments and notes here, Carl. I was very interested by what you said about the compliance side of things. And you touched on that recreational perspective that I think people butt heads with quite commonly in the cannabis industry, whether it is the boards, founders, investors. They're getting sort of conflicting information from markets where recreational cannabis is the real main driver of business, versus, say, Europe now, where we say more of a medical. It's getting creeping in some recreational. Obviously, the strains and some of the terminology is still not quite, hasn't quite reached the levels that it needs to, perhaps, in terms of like pharmaceutical standards and medical standards. But at the moment, what sort of issues have you seen from that sort of conversation spiraling out of control, if that makes sense, with regards to the decision-making process of businesses, recreational advice versus, say, that medical advice? Do you see, with the clients you speak to at the moment, for example, particular issues or examples where that is maybe leading them astray, costing them money, slightly opening them up to maybe some extra risk that they don't need to be considering, or are they, again, losing maybe sight of their end customer and what that customer needs to do? What sort of discrepancies?
I know where you're going.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. And it, again, losing sight of their end customer or their end market is the big part. And this is why people like yourselves go down the route of educating companies and doctors and whoever else it needs to be, people, personnel, because the issue that a lot of people face is there's a lot of misinformation. And of course, there's a world on the internet that has a lot of information that's based on fact, but also based on opinions. And you need real facts from real people that have exactly seen it and suffered the pain. And if you don't follow the regulations and you step into the world of, well, you know, I maybe be able to do a bit of recreation, or maybe able to, you know, sell it to these people because they're offering to buy it, and they may be a recreational people, then you're basically trading illegally if you don't have the license to do it. So you've got to understand the differences between what you think is right and what is actually right, and learning it all the time. So for instance, if you're a grower in the UK and you decide that, you know, there's a guy around the corner who wants to buy my CBD flower and he wants to roll it up into pre-rolled cigarettes, there's no doubt that there's going to be a level of THC in there that's not allowed in the UK. And so you're then falling foul of the law because you sold it to him. It's not his problem, it's your problem for not checking out your client. Mm-hmm. Again, comes back to liability, but in a different form. And your license is very clear, no matter what jurisdiction you're in the world. The license set is very clear to tell you what you have to do when you're exporting it. You're still the owner of that product until it's in somebody's hands, but you've traded with somebody that is not permissible in your regulations.
No, so I was muted then.
Sorry.
So on that note of maybe some of those risks, when it comes to sort of distinguishing organizations and helping them add unique value, where and what do you think cannabis cultivators could maybe be capitalizing on more, or maybe avoiding potentially between those investment rounds in those early stages where they have to be quite entrepreneurial to show that progress, maintain that confidence with the investors, and demonstrate progress and outcomes, perhaps? Yeah. Where are companies at the moment mainly going wrong, do you find?
Not taking the right advice. I know that sort of steps me into the frame a little bit, but honestly, you need the right advice, whether it be via a consultant, advisor, or however you want to do it, or as a board advice to keep you on the straight and narrow. Because regulation, one, is there for a very good reason, but two, can be very complex to navigate, and there's interpretations that could be very finely interpreted one way or the other, and you need to know the rules that you have to follow in, so the guidelines that you've got to go through. And it's quite common that I meet companies that believe they can do one thing, and then of course I explain they can't. They're not overly happy, but then we've saved them a whole heap of money and a whole heap of pain. And also take some very good legal advice as well. And there are some very good legal cannabis-based companies in the world. UK has got some very good ones, because they will know the subtle differences as well in the product. And of course, if you're in the UK and you read the Home Office guidelines, it's a little ambiguous. There's some things in there that are not overly clear, and they might be worth challenging. But think about it from your business perspective. Have you got deep enough pockets to challenge it? And I don't mean in the sense of I'm going to go and I'm going to tell them I'm right. Well, no, I mean by people who go and challenge it and then own up to the problem later by trying to say sorry. Because the sorry, I mean, it's great just to, retrospectively say, oh, sorry, I didn't know what I was doing, but then close you down tomorrow. And can you afford that? That's what I'm talking about.
Maybe a bit of a discussion then for investors who are potentially getting burned in the industry at the moment. We see tons of it where people come to us after the fact and go, oh, what should we do now?
Yeah.
Go back to your initial point, better advice at the start. But where do you see the majority of issues arising from when it comes to people investing in cannabis companies? Because you see them being traded hand over fist basically at the moment in terms of facilities and different resources that are either going through M&A acquisitions, or maybe they're starting from fresh. Do you have any guidance for investors that are looking at this going, what the hell do I start with? Where I'm hearing this, but then I'm seeing that.
So, yeah, it's a good one.
That misinformation again, really, isn't it? But
yeah, a little bit. I mean, the biggest part is due diligence. A lot of people who invest in businesses early on, whether they be cannabis or others, are usually family and friends, and it's based on trust. And it's a punt on a wing and a prayer, and it might happen, it might not. But later on, when you need that money, what is actually in place? Do they have a real solid business plan? Is the forecasted projections pie in the sky, or are they pretty much accurate? Ideally, you want to see them on the low side. So under promise and over deliver is the key for the company. And shareholders also like to understand that, the low end of the market, not just the high end of the market. So you're attracting people to see the potential. And also within cannabis, you've got to make it plain to the shareholders that it's not a quick win. We're not going to make money in 3 years. We're not going to make money in 4 years. We're going to make money in 5 years or 6 years. So your return on investment is going to take a while. And that's because you're investing in a newly legal narcotic. And that comes with, as we mentioned previously, a whole raft of rules, regulations, and its own set of other problems that come in play. But the other part as well is understand the people behind the company, and not necessarily the founders entirely, but those that have been brought in later. Are they fit for purpose for running the business? Are they fit for purpose for being the custodian of your money and spending it wisely? And get as very, very regular updates as possible, and challenge those updates. Never feel afraid to challenge, because as owners of the company, you've got a duty to a fiduciary duty, to be fair. In the UK, it's pretty much the same all over the world, to answer the shareholders' questions as clearly and obviously as honestly as possible. But due diligence is the key part. And we offer due diligence on companies if you're looking to get involved in. So we can look at, are they real? Are they doing what they say they're doing? And is the possibilities of them succeeding there?
You used a nice bit of language there, Carl. Custodians
Yeah.
of money. I think a lot of the time it does end up getting spent as if it is the CEO's own money. And I think we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about travel, for example,
Yeah.
and networking. And it's going, oh, we've got 200 grand in the bank. Let's go spend all 200 grand flying around to every nice
Yes.
location event that we can go and mop up. And I've seen it plenty of times. And we're not saying it. We're not making it up. It like these things are happening, and we're sort of like not fear mongering, I suppose how we call it. It's kind of like these are things that you wouldn't think people would have to be told almost, or in I guess strange things that do happen in an industry that doesn't quite have the structures in place, and it is a sort of burgeoning industry, I suppose. So I don't know, maybe people don't think that level of due diligence is needed because, oh well, what can I look at anyway? It's all new, and it's a bit of complacency.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, if you look at some of the large cannabis companies in the world that have lost not millions but billions, and people like let's say MedMen over in the US, they were living it large and they are no more. Had a great business. If only they'd put the money into the business and worked on it correctly. There's a few other things they did wrong as well, but that was the main one. I mean, I saw at the very beginning, the cannabis company that inspired me to go and do what I do, get into the world of cannabis, that I saw, obviously, well, this is just a dream industry, as it were. They raised an absolute mountain of money and then hired private jets and flew all their staff all over the world talking about how much money they'd raised. But that's not really building anything. You've got to build it to make it work. You can't talk about it all the time. And there's still a bit of a hangover and a bad taste in investors' mouths from that. But I encourage people now who are looking at the industry to look at it as a real industry, a more mature industry, an industry that doesn't have crazy valuations unless there's real progress. And by real progress, they're making money, they're making profits. They've either got a product that's going through phase studies, they're going to release a medicine-based product in the future. They're solid companies. And those that have already got a lot of commercial contacts in place, they're the ones going to be the ones to make it. And anyone getting into this side of things, especially from the founders and all the shareholders, stay private as long as possible, because going public is great in one respect. Depends on the part of the industry you're in, but it comes with a whole load of even bigger headaches, much bigger headaches, and huge costs as well related to it. Huge costs. But eventually go public if you need to, but make money first.
I did see a lot of non-functional companies that are still getting listed or fundraising, and they're years off from having anything moving almost.
Exactly.
So I've a couple of final questions for you, Carl, to let you get on for your weekend. I want to ask you one final one about cultivation and operations in Colombia and the practicalities and realities of actually owning, operating, and managing a facility. But then talk a little bit about Haffner International and how you help businesses manage the diversity of those sort of situations currently. So maybe using that as a setup for your work that you're working on now and projects and clients that you work with, what should people know about the actual realities of owning, operating, managing, and then running the compliance and the regulations around the sides of that? Are there any golden nuggets that people should maybe consider or have a think about, or elements that you particularly liked, didn't like, or wish you delegated sooner, perhaps?
There's a lot of things I didn't like. The learning from the things you don't like is the best part, because you gain something from it. Listen to the advice that you're given. Listen to people that have done it, because if you don't, as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's a costly exercise. And remove your ego and remove the arrogance. Don't think that you're now a legal drug dealer and you can drive an orange Lamborghini and wear a cannabis leaf suit, like I've seen many do that. Think about you're running a real business. And a lot of people I see that step into it, I know I'm drifting a bit here, but they come from a corporate background where they worked in the city or they worked in an office forever, and I'm going to invest in cannabis. I want to do something different. I can be the next Pablo Escobar and all of that. And they're the ones that have come from such a closeted world that they've got everything they want, all the support they need. So they believe they can run that business in the same way, but then they lose their way and start spending. We've got to buy this, we've got to do that, we've got to go this way, we've got to do that way. And it's a common problem that thankfully is getting less and less. And I always say to people, pivoting in a business is good, but make sure you finish what you start before you start pivoting to the next thing, because in this industry, owning the value chain seems very attractive, but each step of the value chain is a different business. It requires a different mindset, requires a different set of rules, almost a different way of accounting, and all those things get complicated. So finish what you start first, then move to the next bit. So you're running that one perfectly before you start the next step.
Very wise advice. The amount of half-finished, underfunded businesses that have sort of, rather than, I don't know, finish one project, go for 2 or 3 simultaneously and have to continuously sort of like do the sub raises and, we've got to split the shares and get another pool of investors. And it's become,
yeah,
like say, it's, I don't know if that's like the entrepreneurial mentality, maybe battling a corporate mentality where you got to sort of grassroots it from nothing to build it versus.
They're trying to buy value, so it looks attractive to shareholders more than anything. And ultimately, it just drains your finances, and then you need to raise more money, and then you need to raise more, or you need to close, one of the two.
Buying value, not creating it. That's an interesting concept. So maybe on that note then, Carl, of value and services and support and how to actually do it properly and where to go.
Yes.
If you do have these problems and you're dealing with them currently, as you have developed many skills, having done all the jobs within each of the companies over the years, I guess you're quite lucky in that you can provide a number of services. But specifically, Carl, at the moment, what kinds of people do you want to work with? What people should come to you if they are experiencing some of these issues? And how can Haffner International support some of those clients?
Okay.
Maybe a case study, if
best.
Telltale of my very broad questions. Yeah,
I'll narrow it down because it's everybody. I can't really cover with everybody. No, it's businesses that want to start, involve me from day one. Businesses that want to go through either GACP or EU GMP and you're already established, again, involve me in day one of that decision making, especially on the GMP side of things, so that we can help you design your business. We have quite a reach around the world, from North America to South America, a little bit in Central America, Far East, Australia, Africa, and of course Europe and the UK. So it's pretty much everywhere that's friendly. And with that allows us the luxury of having knowledge that a lot of companies don't have in terms of rules and regulations in those jurisdictions, how to get product from A to B, who to talk to in many other aspects that we don't cover. And I mean, there are a couple of occasions where I can't mention names exactly right now, but I've helped rewrite country rules and regulations so that it's giving not necessarily less restrictive, because it's always restrictive, but a way to create freer trade. And of course, audits on suppliers. That's a big one that we do at the moment. So if you're a cultivator and you're buying your nutrients or your pest management products or anything to do with your water or your substrates, know your suppliers, because when I talked about liability earlier, they could be the one that lets you down. And if you've got a crop that's going to be, let's say, worth 100,000 to you at the end of it, and you go through the testing and its heavy metal content is way over and above what it should be, because your fertilizer company decided to change their formula, you are going to be left with a big hole in your banking and your accounting system. And it's another 3 months to make a recovery. So key on that one.
I think, again, unless you've maybe done horticulture or have some sort of background in farming or science in general, I think there's a lot of things you can underanalyze, but maybe overestimate your capabilities on when it comes down to like micronutrients in plants, and you get to like the chemical non-tangible level of science that becomes, I don't know, microscopic sort of challenges to overcome. So I think, Carl, that's a beautiful overview of yourself, background, services, experience, and I would encourage anyone who's been watching this, scratching their head, wondering what specifically we should be doing, where we're up to, please do get in touch with Carl. We'll have all of his contact details here within the community. You will be able to access Carl through the community too, if you're a member. And otherwise, we'll have lots of different signposts to the lovely Mr. Haffner, so you can get in touch with him as and where needed. And I want to say a big thank you, Carl, for coming back to the cannabis industry after having the opportunity to escape it briefly, some of the madness that we've talked about. And then as well, very glad that there are lots of, a growing number of experts come into the sector that can make sure that the industry is moving in a direction overall, rather than, I think a lot of businesses do get stuck in that misinformation bubble and do just end up bouncing from different sources of information and ending up still just as confused as they were at day one, had they spent a bit more time with the right sort of qualified expertise and go into that appropriate knowledge source at the start. So thank you very much, Carl, and thank you to everyone that's been listening. And if you do have any questions, problems, topics, get in touch and we'll signpost and get you in touch with the right people. But thank you very much, Carl. I really enjoyed that and geeked out a little bit on a few topics, and I'm sure we'll have many more conversations and discussions to come. But, big thank you, Carl.
For everyone listening, hope it's been relevant to you.
Undoubtedly. Thanks, sir.
No problem.